Welcome to the Ketones and Coffee Podcast with Lawrence Manaig, where we explore the ketogenic lifestyle and how it can improve your physical and mental health. Each week, we bring you valuable insights and advice from experts to help you on your journey to a healthier lifestyle. This episode is brought to you by BasicKetogenicLifestyle.com, where Lawrence coaches individuals with depression to reverse their symptoms and achieve a healthier, happier life using an evidence-based approach. So sit back, relax, and join us as we dive deep into the world of ketones and coffee. Subscribe to the Ketones and Coffee Podcast today and never miss an episode.
I'm so excited for this, guys. Stick around because our esteemed guest is Dr. Lisa Weideman, a true advocate of reversing chronic illness and halting the progression of macular degeneration through the carnivore diet. As an optometric physician with over 3 decades of experience and 14 years of coaching experience, Dr. Lisa has guided countless individuals to ditch medications and embrace a vibrant, healthy lifestyle one step at a time. But that's not all. As a true culinary enthusiast, Dr. Lisa brings her love for cooking healthy carnivore meals to the forefront of her mission. She's a firm believer in the holistic approach to health and emphasizing not only the importance of nutrition, but also the benefits of exercise, restorative sleep, soaking in some sunshine, and more. I'm with the carnivore doctor herself, Dr. Lisa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Wow, that introduction just pretty much laid out exactly where I am in my journey, which I'm just so passionate to help everybody understand that you have the power to direct your life to health and to be healthy and live healthy. And it is not normal for us to deteriorate and go into disease state as we age. Our bodies are here to evolve, and it tries its hardest up against what garbage we have typically been putting in our mouths for decades. It tries so hard to just keep healing. And the problem I feel with our whole healthcare system is they're patching symptoms and they're throwing medications. And I get it. Somebody comes into the office, they've got complaints, symptoms, and what are you supposed to do? You have to try to address it. But really, ultimately, it's all about root cause, and it's all about finding out why you have those symptoms. Don't throw a medication at it to change or mask or alter what you're feeling, but it's not changing the disease process beneath. So I just feel so strongly that we all have the power to make that change. The rules are simple, but executing isn't always easy. And so I'll get into my background really. Please. Is coming from severe carb and sugar addiction and binge eating disorder. And it wasn't until I truly understood that some of us are really just driven to continue to eat that addictive stuff. And I'm finding out many of us are, because I host coaching groups to talk about this and to figure out how to stay out of what I call the ditch, the carb ditch. And it's so important to reduce inflammation, and this whole disease process it's so important, as from where you're at, is reducing all of that. The processed food, to me, you got to eliminate it. The processed food, the grains, the seed oils, and sugars. Sugar is inflammatory also, but all of this has to be, just that part of it's hard enough. And then I tell people it's like you're at level 101 when you're at this epiphany where you're like, oh, wow, you mean that's not normal to eat pizza and pasta? I'm like, no, that's not normal on earth for us as humans to be roaming around and finding pizza or pasta and eating it. It's not. We're supposed to be eating meat, seafood, eggs, and dairy if you tolerate it. And I know there's a gray area between keto and carnivore, and I'm totally open to that gray area of whatever works for people. But ultimately, people have to go through an elimination to figure out what is and is not working. I mean, there's depression,
Yeah.
anxiety, there's GI issues, there's joint issues, autoimmune issues. There's so many aspects to this that we could talk for weeks here, Lorenz.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I love that when you said root cause, because it's not always a connection that people make, right? It's not the first thing that your doctor would tell you, right? And when I heard one of your interviews, and it really resonated with me, and you talked about why you started sharing your story, and I loved your answer, and I'll paraphrase here, and you said it's not always easy to share our struggles, but if you can just help that one person to share, I knew I had to have you on, right? So I love your story. I mean, you've started 14 years ago. You said carnivore diet. I don't think anyone knew what carnivore was, but you did, right?
Yeah, we called
Yeah,
it zero carb back
zero
then. That
carb.
was the term that was used because it was a group of people who were part of a low carb forum. So now you have to remember this is before Facebook and
Yeah.
Instagram and YouTube mainly, that this was people who were doing low carb, and they went so low that they were doing what then was considered, and I guess still is considered,
Yeah.
the Atkins induction phase, which is typically that first 2 week period where he basically has you eating bacon, meat, eggs, and that's it. And this group of people were they were just so enthralled with how well they felt, and the weight was coming off and the inflammation. They were like, why do we have to stop induction? Because as soon as I start reintroducing these other foods, first of all, it's a slippery slope back to where you were. And why are you changing from something that's working so well? So they formed this little thread on this big low carb forum. And within their thread, it was growing. They had more and more people that said, hey, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
This is crazy, right? No, this isn't crazy. Let's do it. Let's start researching Stephenson, the explorers from way back, start reading books, Fat of the Land and Not by Bread Alone. These are our writings from a long time ago. And they were starting to talk about it. Well, they got booted off of this low carb forum. And Charles Washington formed his own forum online, which I was so fortunate on the night of March 9th, 2009, to have been surfing diligently trying to figure out how I could resolve my problem. And yeah, it was kind of crazy back then. It was this little group of people, and and that's why I feel it's so important to have community and a support system, because I call it, we're flying our freak flag. Like, nobody eats this way. Now, there's
No.
many more people. Now we've got Joe Rogan and
Yeah.
Sean Baker interview that kind of moved the movement much bigger. And even the whole keto
Yeah.
movement grew and grew with people having success. So it's really, yeah, it's really empowering to me to
Yeah.
be part of this and to be able to help, because what happened for me is I just went about my way for the first, let's say, 10 years of it, because nobody really wanted to hear my story. What do you mean you don't eat fruit and vegetable?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, it's all right. I feel good. And then when I started, I guess it was right when Joe Rogan, Sean Baker interview happened. And then all the comments that were starting to dart out that were like, well, that's all well and good now, but you're going to die of a heart attack in 5 years. Or
Yeah.
this is not possibly sustainable. And I was just like, yeah, here I am.
She's still here. Yeah.
It actually is.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that it really has to come down to your own personal experience. I jumped in and did it because I had enough of a reason to say,
Yeah.
you know what? Nothing else has been working, so why not?
I always say that when people are at that peak breaking point, like most of the people I've had on the show and most of the people who had success, is they were fed up. They're at that peak breaking point of say, hey, nothing else is working. Like, thing that is, I have is, seeing these other people having success on a different diet. Like, also for me, when you said you want to share your story, I cannot let anyone who struggled like I did, and now I get it. Back then, it might not be the same, right? Obviously, when the carnivore diet, the keto diet is very much more mainstream now. Not as mainstream as other diets, but it is out there, and if people not knowing about this now, if they choose not to follow through, that's totally fine. But at least they know that there's another way, right? There's another, not just the conventional route, which is pills, medication, and everything, right? But Dr. Lisa, I want to go back to you with the sugar and carb addiction. You said you realized it was a true addiction. Many people had said that healing starts when you finally identify it. How did you realize that you were struggling with it?
Well, when you do things secretively, when you do things that you're ashamed of and you can't understand why you repeat the behavior, when you know better, but you still get in your car and you go drive to get your, what I call DOC, your drug of choice. These are things that make you pause and say, what's going on here? Why am I doing this? And I still at that point didn't connect it and say, this is an addiction. I'm addicted, right? Like, it was still just like, I just couldn't get out from under myself from what was going on. And I think what had to happen is just over time, once I realized that this way of eating, and for me, it was turning to go true carnivore, because I could overeat and feel full on even something like Brussels sprouts. And doing it this way, and when you, and this is again from my perspective, when you're chewing carrots, tomato, Brussels sprouts, even things that are healthy, quote unquote, right, healthy, they break down into sugars in our bodies because it's a carbohydrate. And when I realized this group of people was eating just meat, seafood, and eggs pretty much, I was like, wow, so this is removing, I can abstain from this entity that is truly an addiction. And then I started reading how sugar's more addictive than cocaine and heroin, and reading those kind of studies. And I'm like, this is wild. Like, and then looking at the brain scans of how your dopamine centers fire up, and it's just mind-boggling that I thought, wow. So I looked at it as a spectrum no different than, let's say, an alcohol, where there are some alcoholics who will drink literally until they black out each time they drink. And there's others who are alcoholics who will just have 2 or 3 every single night, and they're functional and they work and they have family, but they're still an alcoholic. And then there's some that, let's go down to have a drink every single night, but they don't miss it and they get cranky if they can't have it or whatever. So I'm like, wow, there's this whole spectrum of people who have to have their chocolate every day, all the way up to people who are binging on packages of cookies or potato chips or whatever it is. And it came about to me that and as I'm coaching and helping people out of this, is that you have to realize abstinence is what's going to work. There's no moderation in this. I can't eat half of a cupcake. I do not moderate that. I would bake cookies with my kids in the past, and I'm not eating one Toll House chocolate chip cookie. There's no such thing for me as eating one. I can't moderate. I don't have sober behavior around many foods. So the beautiful thing is I can be perfectly healthy, and not just perfectly healthy, but figured out that this really is the ultimate way to nourish our bodies without those foods. So that's really where my path led, with was trying to help others out of that horrible cycle of yo-yo dieting. We've all done it. Like, oh, let's go on the cabbage soup diet. Oh, okay, well, maybe you lose a few pounds and that works for a few days, but then you got to go back to eating.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, here's a really important thing. What is your relationship with food?
Yeah.
Are we eating for stress, anger, boredom, procrastination, right? Even out of happiness, sometimes we eat. And that is all the reasons for in our natural, as a human living being on earth, we're not supposed to eat for entertainment. We're supposed to eat out of hunger. And to understand that we turn to food and we console ourselves with food. And we've learned through so many decades, even starting as a kid when you're given M&Ms for going to the bathroom and getting out of your toilet training days, right?
Yes.
A lot of things are really centered around food. And again, this is one of the most difficult addictions to overcome because there's triggers constantly around us. If you're an alcoholic and you're sober and you've been sober a number of years and people know you don't drink, nobody's coming up to you and saying, oh my gosh, you got to try this Cabernet. It's the best I've ever had. Like, right? Nobody does that. But with food, it's not known that it's a true addiction. And people are just laughing and eating it around you. And not only that, they're like, oh, Aunt Sue made your favorite chocolate mousse. You got to try it. She'll feel so bad if you... It's very difficult. And you go into Home Depot to buy a hammer, and there's the new Reese's peanut butter cups that have crushed potato chips in them now. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere, so it's difficult.
Now that you mention it, it is the most difficult addiction. Michael Collins, the founder of sugaraddiction.com and the Quit Sugar Summit, he said, sugar never really got the respect as a drug of abuse and a psychoactive drug, and the dose is the poison. He's like, all the brain, all the reward chemicals are affected by the drugs and alcohol the same way sugar does. And that resonated with me. He said, addiction is addiction. He left
Absolutely.
it right.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that people do not recognize it as that. Some people do, like me and you and Mike Collins and people who are, and there's millions of people that are in OA, Overeaters Anonymous. Why? Because they're addicted to this stuff and they can't stop eating it. And unless, for me, the answer is abstinence, and people say, well, you can't abstain from food, that's why it's so hard. Well, au contraire, you can abstain from the addictive food. And when I found out, because realistically, nobody's binging on eggs, nobody's binging on seafood, fish, nobody's binging on a steak. You're not sitting there eating 5 of them because you're getting a dopamine hit off of it. So that's the beautiful thing with this, is that when you eat natural protein and fat, that's really, there's no addiction to that. But all the addictive foods, let's just like a cookie, they combine fat and sugar and typically salt, and that's quite a combination to put together. And that's where the addiction experts that these big food companies hire, they all have them, addiction experts. Think about that.
Wow.
To try to make the food, like Doritos, potato chips, as addictive as possible. And it really starts to anger you when you realize how much money you're wasting paying these companies for the food that they are intentionally making for you to be addicted to.
That should piss you off. I mean, to anyone who heard that should piss you off, right? They basically don't have your best interest in mind.
Zero
best interest. If you, like I say, if you let the government tell you what to do, the right thing to do, you'll be waiting a long time. Or the industries, or we're living in a capitalist society, and these things go under the radar, right? That should piss you off. I mean, I want to address something though that you mentioned earlier about dieting and why people, when they diet, they would lose the weight, and then when they go back, they will gain all the weight back. The logical mind will say, hey, I went on a diet, I lost a lot of weight by eliminating sugars and carbohydrates. And when you do go off, when you do go back to your diet, it's logical that you will gain all the weight back, right? So for you, you should think of this as a lifestyle. You shouldn't go back, right? A logical mind would say, hey, with eliminating sugar, I was healing. My body was healing. Why would I go back? Right? For some people, hey, diet doesn't work. I gained all the weight back after doing it and more. Obviously, that's going to happen, right? What do you think?
Yeah, well, there's no going back because if you're going back, then that means you're going back to the way you were.
Yeah.
And that's why, earlier when I mentioned that whole Atkins thing, and one of the things, like if I'm somewhere and my eating habits are called to attention, that somebody might say, oh, you're doing that Atkins thing, aren't you? And I go, well, I guess sort of you could call it that. It's just, and then they go, oh, I know so many people and myself, I did Atkins. It worked great, but I put all the weight back on. And you have to think, whatever is getting you to your hopefully ideal body weight is what you have to keep doing. There's no diet. We're not going on a diet to then come off the diet. We're trying to evolve and change and figure out what we're going to put in our mouth to keep us the healthiest that we can. There's no manual on this. There's no instruction book. We have to figure out, if you were really plopped on earth with a sharp stick, how would you feed yourself? And for me, I would not be foraging for a raw potato in the ground. I'd be looking for a wildebeest. and so this idea of going on and off or restricting myself now, but I'll be able to have it one day. No, not even in my thought process. And people say, well, what you're doing is so restrictive. How could you possibly do it? I get so bored. I'm so bored of eating meat. I'm like, no, it's not boring at all. You know why? Because it is, and it's not restrictive. I feel so free. I feel free to eat as much as I want within my parameters of the food I have sober behavior around. And the things that are boring to me, boring is waiting online at the pharmacy to fill a prescription. Boring is waiting in the waiting room of doctor's office. That's boring. But choosing a delicious meat like lamb or beef or ribs, that's not boring. And I believe the person's little, I call it the ditch demon that is up in our head trying to root you on to get you back to the junk. That is what's convincing you, oh, you're too bored. You couldn't possibly keep doing this. Well, yeah, I could. I feel so good. I feel healthy. I can't imagine eating any other way. Even I could eat ground beef every single day, Lorenz. I could. Like when I get hungry enough, it's delicious and it's nutritious and it makes me feel good and it fuels me. So why do I feel like I have to start figuring out when I could reintroduce bread or have some chocolate? Those things did nothing beneficial for me. And I said, just have a funeral for your friend. And one of my sayings is, suck it up, buttercup. Out it goes. It's not doing you any good. You have to determine, and I get it though, there's so many pressures with holidays and socialization and family pressures and let's say family, friends, or coworkers who think you're absolutely concerned and are genuinely concerned about you. And I say, I really appreciate your concern, but I feel great. I feel better than I've ever felt in my
Yeah.
life. I'm 58 years old. I can do cartwheels on the beach.
That's a bigger
I feel,
status.
I feel amazing. Why? And you know what? Guess what? They were not concerned at all about me when I was eating cookies and donuts and pizza and pasta. They did not come up to me and worry one bit when I would eat
Yeah.
whatever the standard American junk, SAD. So here I try to not call it the SAD diet, SAD. I call it standard atrocious diet, so it can apply to anybody in any country.
Right.
But when I was treating my body like a trash can, unbeknownst to me, because I'm going along trying to eat healthy, the salads with the lean chicken breast and
Yeah.
making the whatever boneless, skinless chicken breast with rice and broccoli, and then I'd go off the rails. I whatever for whatever reason, and I realized I didn't have enough good, nutritious, fatty protein to satiate me. And you also have to get off of the junk. You have to get off of the drug before you can possibly think about relieving yourself of the addiction. Because I say it's like feeding a stray cat. You can't keep giving it a little bit because it keeps coming back and wanting more. So it's not easy. You have to have that realization of
Yeah.
what you want for yourself. And I don't think anybody comes to this type of eating. And keto, we could talk about the whole keto thing, because the part of the issue with keto for many people who come from, let's say, my binge on and off yo-yo diet kind of background, they're so eager to substitute those keto foods, the keto pancakes, the keto bread, the keto treats, the keto brownies, the keto cheesecake. And you're just, I say, changing seats on the Titanic. You're still not correcting your relationship with food. You're still driven to eat it, and the artificial sweeteners are still driving you at it. Now, there might be a time and a place to try to ease somebody into that off of the standard atrocious diet, but it's really tough. This whole thing is just very, very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you know what? You've said it. Freedom. It's all about that. And for some people, I think, I'm curious though. I wonder how much of the addictive mind is talking there when people say, "Hey, it's restrictive," right? Also, why is something so important not talked about so much? Like health, for example. When we talk about how difficult it is to navigate a carnivore diet or a keto diet, how have we come this far into just disease, right? Because when we think about it, you are so healthy, you've reversed your addiction, right? And your skin condition, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I used to have I had acne as a teen a bit too, but as an adult, I have pictures of, I had it all down my neck, and and that typically for a lot of people can be the driving force of why they want to change what they're eating. But it has to be enough of a reason, because this, I keep coming back to it, because my own parents, I couldn't even talk into changing what they ate. It was so sad for me, because ill health, obesity, diabetes, my parents are obese, my brother's obese, they're all diabetic. I get it. I get how strong the addiction is, because how would they not listen to their daughter or sister who's a medical professional, who is, I'll just say, like the picture of health compared to them, and trying to explain this, crazy way of eating, because they watch TV and Dr. Oz and all the normal mainstream media message of eating low fat, limit your red meat. Ah, really? I eat red meat every day, all day.
I've been trying to solve this mystery on how I can convince people more without shoving this down their throat. I mean, I've debunked. You are a picture of health. You've debunked a lot of these misconceptions about red meat, about fat, and about just how bad it is to eat this way of eating that people normally eat, right? I mean, it's so confusing to live on this side of of health, right? It's so hard to live life like this that you can't even share it with your families and friends.
You want to shout it from the rooftop, and then it's like nobody wants to listen. Why? Because they want to eat their nachos grande and their pizza and their beer and go about what they're doing. They can't comprehend this. And it really comes down to, from all my experience and years of doing this, is I say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him carnivore. There's just they have to have their own inner why that makes them cry.
Yeah.
They have to be in either so much pain or see certain things happening and getting certain diagnosis and a combination of things. But I'm trying, and you're trying to help people before they get to that stage, because this is slow suicide.
Yeah.
You keep eating the standard atrocious diet. And when I say standard atrocious diet, I'm even talking about something simple like you go to the local deli and you order a tuna fish sandwich. That's mayonnaise is loaded with seed oils. It's so toxic. You have to avoid it like the plague. And so people say, oh, I don't eat that stuff. I eat healthy. I have oatmeal for breakfast and I had a tuna sandwich for lunch. And then I went out to a restaurant and I had a beautiful piece of salmon. Really? That restaurant squirts the seed oil in the pan before they sear your beautiful, healthy salmon. And was your salmon farm raised or wild caught? Because the farm raised are fed the soy and corn pellets that are also causing issues. So yeah, it's very
we know for somebody like you, it's really difficult to navigate talking to people about this, especially when they're really, really close to you, especially a loved one that you really want to help, right? It's really hard. I mean, it's easier to teach a stranger that obviously they came to the diet wanting to learn more and better themselves, right? And they're ready. I think it has to be, like you said, it has to come from them, a struggle or a combination of things, like you said. Maybe they're more... that's why I'm doing these interviews, because I'm trying to figure out what it is about the story that this person resonated with carnivore or keto. For some people, no matter what happened to them, they'll still do the same diet without even connecting it to what's happening or why they have these diseases, right? I'm just still trying to figure it out, and that's why you're here. You have so much success with the carnivore diet, and you've reversed chronic disease, and you are helping a lot of people with your advocacy. And you stayed quiet about this for the most part, but what made you decide to start sharing your story more openly? Any specific reasons that motivated you?
Yeah, well, I had mentioned just before, remember I raised my hand when they were like, well, this is not sustainable. You can't possibly do this long term. And you might think you're doing good now, but eating that much meat for that many years, certainly you're going to have a vitamin C deficiency. You're going to risk scurvy. You're going to have imbalances. You can't stay eating that low of a carb for that long. And mainly just saying it's great that you're feeling better, but you can't sustain that. And I'm like, yeah, you can. All right. And then I went on and I went on Instagram and I decided to just have a little separate thing, and I just made up the name Carnivore Doctor. And I started making comments and talking and following others that were in this space. And then the more I did and the more things grew, I was like, wow, there's people who really want to hear from somebody who's, I call myself a veteran, who's done this for this many years. And to know that my hair's not falling out, I don't have scurvy. I like, let's put this out there for the people that do want to hear. And it's interesting. The one thing that I hear what you're saying, because it's my same frustration. It's like, how do we get people who need this to need to hear this and do this? How do we get them to want to hear it? And Charles Washington, I refer back to him because he's one of the original like gurus of starting this zero carb movement. He said something really profound, that it's the lucky ones get fat. So eating a garbage diet in some produces arthritis and achy joints, right? Or some skin issues, or it doesn't affect them yet. It's going to after another decade of eating the garbage. The lucky ones put on a lot of weight. Why are they lucky? Because they're the ones that are hunting down, how do I stop this? How do I get rid of this? I don't want to be fat. I don't want to look fat. I want to feel good in my body and in my clothes. The lucky ones get fat because those are ones that are more driven to seek this answer. And I'd say the majority of people who come into this are overweight, looking to lose weight. Now, another amount of years, their body is still degrading as far as anxiety, depression, joint issues that are going, maybe cancer, maybe stroke, maybe dementia, that's going to eventually, but their initial body's reaction was putting on adipose tissue. And some people it doesn't happen like that. And there's even some diabetics. I've had patients who are diabetic who are not obese, but their reaction to this garbage diet was this is how their body responded to it. And whether it's bipolar, multiple sclerosis, psoriatic arthritis, Hashimoto's, thyroid disease, I mean, how much do we hear about all of that? Your body's being attacked by this garbage seed oils, these foods, basically sugar, grains, and seed oils. And the lucky ones got fat back in their 20s, 30s, 40s, before it had expressed itself as a further disease, and sought out what to do. And then as they're dropping weight, they're like, wow, this really helped my anxiety. Wow, I used to have this patch of whatever, eczema on my skin that's gone away. Wow, I used to have skin tags that are gone. Wow, my A1C, which was pre-diabetic before, isn't anymore. So they end up having all these, let's call them what we call NSV, non-scale victories, right? That is then promoting in their head, like, wow, yeah, you got to keep doing this. This is going good. And that's the kind of thing where, yeah, I hate to say it, it's the fat ones that are looking to resolve that issue that is mainly the ones that will at least initially come to this. I mean, there are many others now, though, more so than just with the weight issues. But we're really up against one of the biggest, it's going to go down in history as probably one of the biggest bits of misinformation, which is all started by Ansel Keys when he was trying to prove his fat hypothesis. But saturated fat from animals, let's say beef, lamb, the fat is so nutritious, so healthy. Every cell in our body needs fat and cholesterol. We need it to make the cholesterol. Cholesterol is healthy. All of these things that were so incorrectly for the intent of selling pharmaceuticals and making pharmaceutical executives billionaires. But we have to understand, you have to go read that book, The Big Fat Lie by Nina Teicholz. You have to start really diving in to understand that pretty much we should be doing the opposite of what we're told. I tell people I'm an eye doctor and I don't wear sunglasses. When I'm outside, I want the sun in my eyes. It's healthy. We need it for our brain. We need it for a lot of different functions for cortisol and for our diurnal circadian rhythms. Don't block the sun from your eyes every minute that you're outside. Don't be fearful because every eye doctor you go to says, wear your sunglasses to prevent cataracts and macular degeneration.
Yes.
I call BS on it. Man for millions of years didn't have Ray-Bans and Maui Jims, okay? And they weren't blind from cataracts and macular degeneration. What causes that stuff? Crappy food that you're putting in your body. So, yeah, do the opposite of what you're told. I don't slather on sunscreen. It's a bunch of chemicals that I feel is actually causing skin cancer. I mean, the sales of sunscreen has been so exponentially increasing, right? And so has skin cancer rates. You would think you'd see a nice decline in skin cancer rates with all of the push for all of us to put that stuff on every 30 minutes. And right after you come out of the water, you got to put more on, right? I do not put anything on my skin that I wouldn't put in my mouth and eat because it absorbs right into your bloodstream. And they've done studies where you do one application of sunscreen, that garbage, copper tone, banana boat, you name it, Hawaiian tropic, any of that stuff, right? You put that on your skin. Let's say you put it on today. 7 days from now, they can still detect it in your blood. I mean, it's that powerful of a thought that you have to start thinking about seriously, about everything that you hear and what you're told. And I pretty much say, yeah, just do the opposite. They tell you don't eat red meat. I eat red meat at every meal. Tell you put lots of sunscreen on. I don't touch the stuff. They tell you to wear your sunglasses, protect your eyes. Nope. I mean, obviously there's certain situations if you're near snow or water and there's reflection, or you're going to be out all day on a boat or on the beach for the whole day. Yes, I'm not stupid. You do wear your sunglasses for that. I'm talking about day to day when you go outside for a walk. And every morning you should let sunlight into your eyes. It's so important. And so, yeah, like you said, it's like we were told to fear fat. Oh my gosh, if I could even remember those days back in I guess it was in my 20s and all, I'm just eating salads and I'm eating the low fat dressing and I'm trimming every little speck of fat off my meat because in my mind, fat makes you fat, right? You can't eat fat high in calories.
Yeah.
Dang, boy, was that wrong.
Yeah.
I'm making up for it now.
And you said as an optometric position saying don't wear sunglasses, that's going against the grain again. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I could get in big trouble for a lot of this. And I put out a YouTube video about why this eye doctor says to not wear sunglasses and just to explain the different issues behind why you might want to second guess your thought process about wearing sunglasses all the time. But it's so hard to go against standard of care because that could legally get you in trouble. And it's not so easy in the position that I'm in that I had at the time I was working for a ophthalmology practice and I was trying to root cause heal my patients and spend time explaining to the diabetics that here's a picture of the inside of your eye I just took today. There is some bleeding now. You've got the early starts of diabetic retinopathy. And we really need to work on figuring out how to correct this or else you could go blind. And the person's usually like, all right, what do I got to do? What can I do? And I said, well, you can reverse your diabetes and get off your medication. And they go, oh, no, my doctor told me I'd be diabetic the rest of my life and I'll be on this medication the rest of my life. I go, oh, no, that's not the case. And then I would give them Dr. Bernstein's, the diabetes solution, write that down for them to go and get and read. And I would start talking about this whole thing with keto and carnivore. And they say, well, all right, tell me what do I have to do? What do I got to eat? I say, well, it's more in what you don't eat. I said, no bread, no pasta, no rice. I said, all of that and fruit is just pure sugar. And your body no longer tolerates that. And you're not able to eat it and stay healthy. And then sometimes I get somebody who takes to it and just says, all right, all right. And they come back for their 6-month check and they hug me and they've lost weight and they're even half of their medication now and they're heading to none and they're like got tears in their eyes. And I'm like, yes, this is what this is all about.
Yeah.
But Lorenz, I also have the patient who's sitting in that same chair with that same speech from me and says, oh God, doc, I can't do that. I'm Italian. I can't not eat pasta and bread. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll see you in 6 months and we'll see if there's more blood or not. I can't understand that. And, but yeah, or it's sad though, because there are some people who say, okay, I'm going to do it. And then they try to do it and then they can't. They can't because they're at their next holiday thing or their next social gathering and the foods, and they want to eat it and they start eating it and they go back. They're in the ditch, and sometimes it takes a while to climb back out of that ditch. I mean, it's a really tough road to deal with addiction and to deal with the concept of abstinence. And that's why for the past, I guess it's been almost 3 years now, I have hosted weekly Zoom groups where I have discussions and we share struggles and I talk about how you deal with social situations and what you say to people. And the one key thing that I really feel is so important for everybody to remember, let's say you're on this path and you get it. You're listening to us here and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do keto. And some people start with one and transition to the other, depending on how your journey goes with it. But the thing with the difficult, it's so difficult in so many situations because you have what I call naysayers. I call it they attack you. Attack is a strong word. They nitpick at you. What do you mean you don't eat vegetables? How could that possibly be healthy? And then you might be like, I forget why I don't eat vegetables, but I know there's a good reason. I've watched 5 YouTube videos about it, and there's toxins in the leaves, and there's phytates and lectins, and I can't think of it. You know what I say to people? I go, you do not owe anybody an explanation about what you chew and swallow. You don't. You don't know. Nobody. You owe nobody an explanation. Just do you. And if you're confident by listening to medical professionals like myself, and I could name, there's cardiologist, Dr. Philip Ovadia eats carnivore, Dr. Sean Baker, an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Robert Kiltz is an reproductive endocrinologist. It's like, okay, there are intelligent, educated people out here in the medical profession who have, I'm sure, researched, like I have. I don't take my health lightly. I didn't just jump into this and say, all right, cool, let's go for it. But what I did do was I said, wow, these people who I'm listening to talking about this have very powerful testimonial information and anecdotes. We're not going to wait around. Lisa, I said to myself, Lisa, you're not waiting around for any scientific study because it'll probably be waiting forever because there's no money to be made to tell people to eat meat and drink water. Okay, so who's going to fund a couple $1 million study? And you can't sequester people to eat a certain way, and you can't control what they might and might not be cheating on in your study. So there's really no way to have a valid, the way that they, if you look at Weston Price's work and when they went into primitive populations and communities that were still eating their primitive diet and seeing how perfect their teeth are and their skin and their health, that's the way of determining, okay, now let's look at what they eat. They eat their natural primitive diet before westernized garbage junk invades into their society. So yeah, yeah, it really does still come down to the difficulty of having people have a strong enough reason to want to do it, uh, because it's hard. It's hard with the world we live in.
I really commend you for really going against the grain. Especially, I commend Dr. Philip Ovadia. You mentioned Dr. Klitz, a few others that really go against the grain and going against their training, because that's really hard to do. You are really, for some people, risking their career, right? And if, I think who said this, that somebody I had on the show, I can't remember his name, but he said it's malpractice if you hear about keto or carnivore diet that reverses chronic illness and you didn't do anything about it in your practice, then it's a malpractice. And why would you want your patients to get better? Like you said, one patient of yours said his doctor said, he would be diabetic most of his life, for the rest of his life. And that's just not the case. It is reversible through eliminating some of the foods like sugar, grains, seed oils. If you just eliminate those, you will be so much healthier and you can reverse your chronic illness. But for some doctors to just brush it off and not follow through, that could be malpractice, because giving an option to people, like you said, I mean, even if some people don't take it seriously or don't take your advice, that's okay, as long as you did your best to relay that information. You did your due diligence at the end of the day, and who knows if that person would still try it down the line, right? Maybe it will resonate, your message will resonate with them later on, right? The most important thing is he has the information that you relayed to him, right? If he practices it or not, it's up to him or her. So I really commend, I call you guys true practitioners, right? Because you've been through the struggle and you're practicing it, really, right? Not just through training, but through your own experience.
Yeah, and to your point, as far as, yeah, against the grain, yeah, that's an understatement. And even so, Sean Baker, he was determined for himself how much better he was feeling, and he started telling his prospective knee surgery patients, why don't you try this thing? It sounds crazy, but I had this incredible experience with it. I know people can resolve joint pain and issues. They would come back in 6 months and cancel their surgery and be so grateful and thankful to him that how great they felt. And he pretty much got written up and ousted out of that hospital system for a decline in surgical rates, kind of thing. I myself had issue. I was an employee at a practice, and they did not want me discussing this root cause. And so we mutually terminated my position because I was not able to bite my tongue and not attempt to help people that way. So fortunately now I work at a practice where I can say and do what I want. I've had even some of my followers who have found me through either YouTube or Instagram, or I guess Facebook too, I'm on a little bit, and have traveled distances to come have an eye exam by me. And I feel grateful to be in a position to help people and to just try to be one of the little armies, one of the little soldiers in the army of trying to buck the big bad system out there of what's making so many people sick and full of disease.
I have so many other questions for you, but I think we are running out of time. Where can people find you, Dr. Lisa Weideman?
So I have over on YouTube a channel called Carnivore Doctor, and Premiering tonight is a second channel I just started. I'm doing a separate eye doctor vision and ocular health channel. So there, and mainly on Instagram is the other place to get in touch with me. I do try to be really good about answering messages that I get, and I'm very well known. I think I was anointed the meetup queen. I gather people who are in the keto carnivore community to come together and eat meat and share stories and just have great face-to-face interaction. And yeah, I have one in Denver a week from Saturday, and the following weekend I'll be in Scottsdale hosting people to eat meat with me. And then in October I'll be in Tennessee. And I have a goal of trying to host a meetup in every state, which kind of sounds crazy, but they're so empowering and so magical to get people together, and then they exchange information. And then, I hope that people can just not feel so out of place in this kind of thing. I mean, keto's become so commonplace. It's fine. People are like, oh, I eat keto and it's fine. But when you go full carnivore and you literally just eat meat, seafood, and eggs, you don't feel so comfortable in your own family sometimes. So it's just really good to be able to communicate with others. So yeah, that's pretty much. And then hopefully, if I find some time, I'm going to write a book too.
Awesome. Dr. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your story here. We'll link everything down in the description box below so you guys can find Dr. Lisa Weideman. And maybe you can attend one of the meetups that's happening around the city, maybe coming to Canada. Who knows, right?
I'm actually doing meetups around the world too. And
Awesome.
I have quite a few people in Canada that are enticing me to come up. So there will be some in Canada for sure.
Awesome. We actually host the Ontario Keto Fest every year. So I was part of it. I was the host for the Keto Talk for Ontario Keto Fest. So maybe we can join forces and come up here.
Let me know when it is, and I'll see if I can join in and do a meetup at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lisa. I appreciate your coming on and just sharing your story, your advocacy, and really just educating people. And I really appreciate people like you who just are trailblazers and not afraid of criticism of what might people say, with just the mission of helping that one person. So thank you so much again, Dr. Lisa.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to the Ketones and Coffee Podcast today and never miss an episode.